Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes in public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. The show is produced by the POCUA and is founded upon its Soundness Initiative. This episode is sponsored by the Finest Service Organization, a provider of line-of-duty death loan protection through many of our POCUA institutions. I am Ken Bader, your host for Public Safety Talk Radio, and I have another intriguing guest, not only former military, former law enforcement, but current author. His name is not Strawberry Topping, not Hot Fudge Topping, but Glenn Topping. We have with us today who is a retired sergeant in the sheriff's office of 25 years, prior organized crime detective. That is really interesting, working on drug smuggling. Did you ever smuggle any good drugs that we can talk? Never mind.
I can confirm nor deny that.
Or deny. See, you're already playing along just perfectly. But he was also a field supervisor, was featured on Cops, which is a damn good show out there. He's an Army military police veteran, and he's an author of 4 novels, which include Look a Quarter, A Young Boy's Pursuit of a Dream, The Hurt, Operation 1600, and I'm sure we're going to talk about all of them and the stuff that he's got coming up. Glenn, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And, so much stuff to dig into. But, I think that the first obvious question is, you went from being in the military to a law enforcement professional to a published author today. Tell us about that progression. Tell us about the motivation to write those books.
Well, ironically, the law enforcement and the military had nothing to do with writing the first book.
I kind of picked up on that going through it a little bit on Amazon, but tell us more.
Yeah, I was working in this rock and roll club back in the early 80s before policing, and we had a drive-by shooting homicide of a bouncer. And it took that, from the shooting to the capture, the trials, to the escape from prison, to a death in prison, to back at the rock and roll club, all back in the 80s, it was the cocaine cowboy days. Yeah. It was all sex, drugs, and rock and roll back then.
That was the 70s.
It was the early 80s, yeah. And 70s. So years later, I had an idea that this crazy story should maybe be a movie script. So I got with the script writer in California, and I already had the outline done. It was like about 95 pages of writing. I lived it, so I was a witness to this whole story, so it was easy to write. So then we put it together in a script format. Then I was talking to this executive producer that I know, who's the executive producer of the Amazing Race TV show.
Oh, okay.
All right. He was the cameraman on the Cops show with me back in 1989. Mm-hmm. So that was my contact. So he said, "Why don't you have the script transform from script to book, and then maybe book to movie?" So I got with somebody else and helped me write the book and put it in book format, which I got the first book, which is called The Hurt. That's how it started.
So that was the first book that you wrote.
Yes.
Okay, so not many law enforcement professionals that we have the pleasure of having, on this show, are published authors, although we've had a few. What was really, going through your mind, in terms of, all right, this is something I really, really need to get out there, or it just kind of, all right, it's something I really want to do, so let's roll with it.
Well, I think it was something I really wanted to do, to project what all the gun violence that was going on back in the early 80s. And so I had that idea of maybe putting it, pen to paper and write it up. And it took me a while to put it together because, you have to, you write 10 paragraphs and you move 3 of them around, then you got to cancel that one out and add 5 more. And it was really a pain in the ass. But eventually it came together. And that was the story. And then I think the book turned out to be a little better than the script.
So when are we gonna see the movie?
Well, it's not easy. Trying to get somebody to look at the script. It's you have to know somebody, and I know a few people, but unfortunately, they're too busy with doing other things right now. Johnny Depp is an acquaintance of mine. We
Yeah.
worked together back in this rock and roll club back in the early '80s. He was at the band,
Hmm.
and now he's a big shot now. So I was always trying to get a hold of him to get involved in my project because he's got his own production company.
Yep.
I'm sure he can afford to buy the script. Not that he's $10 million richer. So
did you ever get introduced to Amber Heard? Let's go there.
no, no.
She's a hell of a lot better looking than than Johnny Depp. Although I am a Johnny Depp fan.
Yeah, me too. We worked together. I met him a couple of times after work. After we did the club, I was working with the sheriff's office. I met him at a couple of events. Talked about old times. It was kind of fun.
Cool. Cool. So are all of your books fiction, or are they all nonfiction, or kind of a combination thereof? Because I know some folks, will take kind of a true story and not call it a true story, but embellish it for entertainment purposes and so forth.
Yeah, they are a mix of both. Obviously, the first one is a true story.
Yeah.
The others were Operation 1600 is a political thriller about a corrupt U.S. president that gets us into a nuclear exchange with Russia. All right. The Looker Quarter is a autobiographical anecdotes about my life growing up in New York, through the military, through policing, through what I'm doing today. And then the other one was a sequel to the first book.
Okay.
25 years later, called The Real Story Behind the Hurt and the Rise and Fall of Extremists. And that was 25 years after the club closed. The same owner reopened it 25 years later, only to find out that he's a legitimate bad guy and he's a member of Antifa. And he lets Antifa and Black Lives Matter work in all the rock clubs, but at night they go out and they cause havoc. Kind of hiding in plain sight.
So, what, I'm sure, you obviously know a number of fellow, other than, obviously Johnny Depp. And by the way, put in a good word, we'll get him on Public Safety Talk Radio. You other than some of these famous folks, you obviously, I'm sure, know a lot of fellow law enforcement professionals and other first responders. When they read your books, I'm assuming they have, what type of feedback do you get? Do you get, wow, that was really good? Wow, there's some realism there, or you get, Glenn, what are you doing, man? Or all the above.
I didn't get any of that.
Yeah.
The few that did read it, luckily they were back in the day. They remember that club where we had the shooting, and they remember reading about the story and said, you got this pretty much right on. It was pretty good. And the book, the story flowed okay. You didn't have to skip around and run back. What did that guy say 10 pages ago? And so, and then I've had other people just say that it came out really nice. I can kind of relate. I wish I lived back in those days, but
I did. I wasn't in Florida, but I did live back in those days. I was in college.
Hey, is the government paying off your loan?
No. I was one of those stupid people that actually paid for all of my college, and now apparently I'm going to have to pay for somebody else's too. Now a word from one of the POCUA's proud business partners, OfficerPrivacy.com. OfficerPrivacy.com was founded by Pete James, a law enforcement professional with over 25 years of experience. Pete wanted to find a way to help law enforcement officers protect themselves and their families. So he formed a team to create a way to quickly identify and remove their information from certain sites. OfficerPrivacy.com is the result. This service is already offered through a select few of our POCUA organizations. As a listener of Public Safety Talk Radio, you can take advantage of a special offer from OfficerPrivacy.com. Go to OfficerPrivacy.com/POCUA, and when you sign up, you'll get 2 additional bonuses. In addition to removing your personal information from the top 30 people search sites, they will give you your first 2 months of monitoring free. This is a value of $39.98. In addition to that, you'll receive a cell phone privacy device, a $19.99 value. This prevents data from leaving your cell phone when you use public charging stations and is a must when traveling. So go to OfficerPrivacy.com/POCUA today to take advantage of this offer and to protect your privacy. Organizations who are members of the POCUA and are interested in offering the service directly to their members, contact us at pocua@btcinc.org. Yeah, going back to your writing, I know, asking this question is, like a Sophie's choice, which kid is your favorite, but do you have one of the books that you've written that is it really stands out at you as, yeah, that one's my gem, that's one that I'm really proud of. Not that I'm not proud of all of them, but I'm really proud of this one, and why?
I'm proud of my first one because I lived it. I was witness to it. I was all part of it. It came very easy to put it together. So my first baby, I love it.
Awesome. So what do you got coming up next?
Oh boy. Well, I'm working on a fifth one.
Okay.
This one's taking me a little while. No rush for it. It's going to be about a guy that becomes the most prolific school serial killer.
Wow.
And I mean, every couple of weeks when something else happens around the country, I try to incorporate that into the storyline. So this one's I'm no rush to do this, but this one's taking me a little while.
So is it kind of like an active shooter type of situation, which unfortunately, we're dealing with today? Or is it, somebody, sneaking around, killing the most annoying teacher in the school?
Actually, it's both.
Okay.
I think my end, I can't give up the ending, but my end will probably be pretty dynamic and pretty crazy.
Okay.
But it's going to be a little bit of both.
Cool. Now, are you going to get Johnny Depp to play that serial killer?
No, I can't afford him.
well, maybe if he buys the script, he'll want to do that.
Yeah, never say never.
So here's a really interesting question. Did you retire and then do some of this writing, or have you been writing all your life? I mean, even, when you got into the military, were you trying to, write some stuff on paper and get some things down and get some ideas? Did you always kind of have this in you?
Well, I started many years ago writing a lot of letters to the editor.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote numerous of them, but whatever the topic was at the time, I would respond to it almost like an op-ed type of thing. And I did a lot of those. I even started one in the Army back in the early 70s. It was during our Reforger event when it was in Northern Germany. Mm-hmm. That was like the first, I think it was the first one I've ever written. And then I kind of go, this is kind of interesting. But when I got out years later, I started doing the letters to the editor.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but with the book, I didn't really start messing with that until about 2 years ago when COVID hit. Mm-hmm. I had time to sit down and really write.
Yeah, we had time to do a lot of things in 2020 that we never thought we would.
Exactly.
Was I the writer or watch a lot of Netflix?
Yeah.
So obviously, there is in any author's book, there's some of you. In what I'm getting at, and I haven't had the pleasure of reading any of your books yet. But what I'm getting here in our short conversation is that there's a lot of you in those books, not only the feeling, but some of the things that, you experienced and so forth. Do you find that there's any therapeutic aspect to your writing, or is it just purely, hey, I really enjoy this, this is fun for me, or a combination thereof?
Well, the first one, because I lived it and witnessed it, was more therapeutic than anything else. Mm-hmm. Because I knew the guy that was murdered. We were friends. He basically died in my arms. I had my finger in his bullet hole trying to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
So every time I look at that, or I even bring up that story, it brings me back to that time frame. It's almost like it happened an hour ago. Right. Mm-hmm. The other one that I'm involved in is the Look a Quarter, because that's an autobiographical anecdote about me. Mm-hmm. So the other two are not. The other two are just strictly totally different people.
Got it. So for, some of those folks out there, I know that, today, unfortunately, we've got a lot of really good police officers that are leaving the job early. They're leaving the job early, maybe to do security. Maybe they're leaving the job early to do something else, whatever that else is. And, some may have the opportunity to be a writer, to be an author, to be a creator, if you will. For those folks out there that, could possibly tap into your knowledge and experience, if they want to be an author, what would you advise for them?
Well, it depends on what they're going to write about. If they're going to write about their history with their policing, then make sure the facts are pretty accurate, because you're always going to have people who are going to look them up.
Mm-hmm.
You got those fact checkers out there. And just be patient, because it's not easy just sitting at a typewriter or on a computer and putting a storyline together, because it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
Unless you're a proficient writer and you've been doing it for a long, long time. Research it. There's books on it, how to do it. You can look up professional authors that have millions of copies of their books out there. They always have symposiums and forums. They like to talk, and just learn about it. Because it's not just sit down and type. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah. Having written a book myself, wasn't fiction. It was or law enforcement related. It was business related. But I could say from my experience, it took me at least 3 or 4 times to sit down to write it before it actually got written. And I'm not saying 3 or 4 times in a week. I would try it, and then I would be frustrated and would go a couple of years, and then I would try again, and then it wouldn't work. And I found for me, and I always like asking fellow authors, I found for me that looking at that, in my case, a blank word screen, that was all white, or you use the typewriter reference. I hope nobody's using a typewriter to write their book these days, given the technology that we have today. But if you do, then so be it. Looking at a blank piece of paper, but seeing that white, at least for me, was really daunting. And that, all right, even with a couple of sentences, it was this large boulder, kind of hanging over me. It's like, oh, I got another paragraph to write. I got another paragraph. And what I found finally that worked for me is I grabbed, all of my, short, presentations. I grabbed, little articles that I'd written, at the time, and I put them into buckets, into chapters. I actually created each chapter, and I just threw Word documents and PowerPoints and all kinds of things in those chapter buckets. And then when I went to those chapters, I went to those pages, I found that, I actually had 50 pages worth of stuff. And then it became more of an editing and building process than a creation from scratch process. I don't know if you did something similar with letters to the editor and things of that nature, but did you go through a similar process, or did you just go to that white piece of paper and say, hey, I got this?
Well, we're looking at the white blank screen on the computer. I'm thinking like, well, this is a lot of space to put words in. I don't know if I know these many words. It turned out it was like 80,000 words later. But if you know the storyline and you know what you want to say, you put it, you just type it away, you type away and type away. But then eventually you're going to have to edit and move things around to sort of make the story make some kind of sense.
Yeah. So it obviously, anybody that wants to find you and buy one of these scripts can go out there on Amazon and find many of these books. Is there any other best way to find you out there? Do you have a website? Are you on Twitter? Are you on MySpace? Do you have a big billboard someplace outside of your house? How can people best find you to find your books and to maybe even make one of these into a movie?
Well, I'm on the typical websites, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, or Nook if you want to read a book, an audio book, or the publisher, which is Ex Libris, on their website. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter. That's it. I don't have a website, but it's funny, today I was interested in looking up billboards mentees mention that. I'll see how much they cost.
Well, having not for my own business, but having bought space on billboards, it depends on where they are as to how expensive they're going to be.
Yeah, they're expensive, not cheap.
Probably today with inflation, not so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, Glenn, I really appreciate, number one, your service as a military professional, as a law enforcement professional. Really appreciate what you're doing with these books, and appreciate you being here with us today.
No, it's great. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you again. And thank you to all of you who have either watched or listened to this episode of Public Safety Talk Radio. And we'll be back with you next week with another great guest. Public Safety Talk Radio was produced by the POCUA. The POCUA is a consortium of financial institutions serving law enforcement as well as other first responders and public safety professionals. To learn more about our association and to find one of our credit unions or service providers near you, go to www.policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't working with one of our POCUA credit unions, you're just banking with an institution that just so happens to serve first responders. As a public safety professional, you and your family deserve better. Find a POCUA credit union today.